Welcome everybody to yet another video. Today I'm going to be transforming this pretty ugly curbside find. It has a lot of issues and a lot of work that needs to be done. You can see that the finish here is completely shot, some of the legs aren't sitting properly, and the bottom drawer is completely stuck, as you're about to see. But it's a good brand name and I have hope for this piece, so let's get into it. My name is Angie and I'm the one behind Transcend Furniture Gallery, a business created from the love of vintage furniture and the desire to take broken, dated, and unloved things and turn them into modern treasures. Sometimes I paint, sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. Okay, so as always, I'm going to start by removing the drawers, having a good look at the piece. This is a perfect time to have a look at the frame, make sure everything is sturdy and intact, assess any repairs that need to be made. And in this case, I notice as I'm about to pull the drawer out that it won't actually come out all the way. I'm pulling, and I'm not pulling too hard because I don't want to break anything. Just trying to coax it out, and it is really stuck, and I'm about to find out why in a few minutes. In real time, this took me about 6 minutes to remove this drawer, as I was afraid of breaking things. But what I learned as I pulled this trim piece off is that the bottom board, the bottom frame piece, was completely warped and pushing upwards into where the drawer would track. So it was preventing the drawer from either pulling all the way out or pushing all the way in. I'm taking off one of the wonky legs now to get a better look at this broken area. There's a screw with half a head, and you can see someone has driven a nail in there and split the wood. So that'll be fun to try to figure out. At this point, I have no idea how I'm going to get that screw out because there is nothing to pull it into, but I ended up just prying the piece off very carefully so as not to break it further. And then I was able to remove it from the bottom and have better access to it. And I'm just using a pair of pliers here to turn that old screw out and get it out of the way. As you can see here, the other side was way easier to remove, no problems there. And this is a great little tool. It's a little ratcheting mini screwdriver thing. I don't know the exact name of it, but I use it all the time. It's great for areas that you can't fit a full-length screwdriver in. And sorry for the shaky video here, this is handheld at the moment, but I just wanted to show you taking off this glue block and just giving it a little pop so I can get this warped piece off and figure out what the heck I'm gonna do. This side needed a bit more coaxing, but we got it off. Before I move on to replacing the warped part, I'm going to glue and clamp this broken piece here. I was just going to try to get the glue in that crack, but it was just hanging on by a thread, so I decided to just pull it off and start from scratch. Making sure there's glue on both sides. I don't normally spread it with my finger. I do on occasion, but generally you don't want to do that just because your fingers can sometimes have oil on them and it can interfere with the bonding. But in this case, my hands were squeaky clean and I wasn't worried about that at all. So I'm just pressing it into place here, getting it lined up. I'm going to wipe off some of the spillage here, and then I'm going to glue the other side and then clamp both sides together. Whenever you're getting ready to glue up two pieces of wood that have been torn apart, you want to make sure there's no little fibers that are folded over because that is going to interfere with how they sit together. So I was just brushing those aside. We're all good to go now, so I'm going to glue it up, put it in place, again wipe off any sort of glue that comes out of the seams, and then we're going to clamp it. I just realized I say we all the time in these videos. It's only me here. I don't know why I say we. I guess it's just because you guys are following along, and I don't know, I guess in a way I feel like you're part of the process. So, you know, we. Once these are clamped, I'm going to set this aside and let it dry for a good part of the day. I want this bond to be nice and strong, so the longer the glue can sit in the clamps, the better. Okay, so I think I have a solution for this piece that needs replacing. This is a solid wood, hardwood piece of a hutch top that I don't need anymore, and it's the exact width on the ends as the piece I need replacing. So I'm just going to cut this along the length here. Watch how strong I am. Look at that. Here I go again. Ready? Oh man, that's awesome. I might want this little trim piece later, so I'm just sort of carefully prying it off. And this is interesting. I don't know if this is original or if someone took a Sharpie and made this design. I don't know. The only reason I think it might be handmade is just because it's quite irregular, but who knows. It's going, either way. I'm definitely keeping the original hardware from this piece, so I'm just going to remove it, set it aside until I'm ready to paint. Oh, tricky drawer. Look at that, it's on the inside now. I am so excited to get this old cruddy finish off. I shouldn't even call it a finish. It's not a stain or anything like that. It's some strange plastic-y, I don't know if it's plastic or not, but it's plastic-y coating that they put on these old dressers, and they usually do it over top of wood that's not the most desirable. Sometimes it's poplar or birch. And then they put this coating on thinking that it looks better, but to me I would much rather have the normal wood. So I'm scraping all of this off. It's way more difficult than a normal finish. As you can see here, I'm having to use my paint scraper. Be very careful if you decide you want to use one of these, because you can gouge the wood pretty easily. As I'm scraping off the last bit and getting ready to sand some of the worst bits away here with 100 grit sandpaper, I'm realizing this looks a bit like birch veneer. So I'm just going to be a little bit careful with it. I'm not going to go too deep. I'm just going to take my time and do a couple different grits to get to where I need to be. Moving up now to a 180 grit to sand things down a little bit finer, and then I'm going to do a final sanding with a 220 grit sandpaper. I'm going to be painting the sides and, well, the base of this piece, so I'm going to do a little scuff sand now. I believe this is 180 grit as well, and all I'm doing is roughing up the surface so that my paint has something to adhere to. Sometimes these weird coatings are a little bit slick, and you can have adhesion problems if you don't do this first. So I was initially thinking I was going to do this drawer wood grain as well, which is why I'm pulling this off to make sanding a little easier, but the funny part is I end up not sanding it down to bare wood and I end up painting it, so I have to put that piece right back on after. Here I'm getting that coating off the drawers. I could have used stripper on the drawer, but honestly, the drawers are actually solid wood through and through, so I'm not as worried about sanding through like I was on the top, which was veneer as opposed to solid wood. I'm doing the same process here where I start with a heavier grit and move up to a lighter grit, and I'm slowing this clip down to regular speed so I can show you what happens right here when you try to reuse a pad. In this case, I had only used a little bit of that sanding pad before and thought I'd pop it back on, and yeah, sometimes the little closures, it's kind of like a Velcro, it just doesn't catch as well the second time and you'll lose your sanding piece halfway through. Sometimes I like to give the sides of the drawers a little refresh. I don't do it all the time, but if the wood is quite yellowed or marred, I'll often give it a little refresh. At this point, I'd already decided to change my mind about this drawer, going from wood to painted. I just thought the painted would look very pretty with the details, so I just gave it a scuff sand as well. And now I'm going to give the whole piece a good cleaning, just to make sure there's no excess sanding dust or dirt that's going to get into my finish, vacuum any bits from inside here. I always check the dovetail joints to make sure everything is nice and tight, and in this case there were a few drawers that needed some extra attention. So I'm just going to lightly pop that up and slide it over and put just a small amount of glue in each little section here. You don't want to put too much because you'll never get the drawer apart again if you need to, but just enough to tighten things up and make the drawer more secure and firm. Just wanted to take a minute and say thank you for watching. If you guys are enjoying these videos, please feel free to like, share, leave a comment, subscribe. It all helps. I'm fairly new at this, but your comments are so helpful, and if you have any suggestions on how I can make these videos better, please feel free to reach out. I definitely appreciate it. These are the two pieces of the long handle that goes on the bottom drawer. I'm going to be staining these because the drawer is now going to be painted, and I think it would be a great contrast. These are the little wood pieces that I popped off before I realized I was going to paint the drawer, so I'm just tapping those back into place. Full disclosure here, and a little disclaimer even, I am not a woodworker. I don't have a table saw to make these adjustments I need to make on this piece. Don't follow my lead here. I'm just trying to get it done with what I have to work with. I changed the depth of my blade here so that it only cuts down as far as I need to make these identical to the original piece, so it'll all fit in place. I'm just sort of chiseling it out to flatten it out. Like I said, guys, this is some backyard stuff here. Please don't judge me too harshly. A table saw is on the list of needs and wants, but it's just not in the cards just yet, so just trying to make do. I'm choosing to add a bit of wood glue when I put these pieces together. I just want to make sure that this is going to be nice and sturdy with my little handmade replacement piece here, and help keep it sturdy in the years to come. Oh boy, so here's the piece. It's not terrible. I actually did a fairly good job considering my limitations with the tools here. I'm kind of proud of myself. It definitely turned out better than I expected. I don't have a single clamp big enough to stretch the whole width of this dresser, so you can see what I've done here is just use two clamps back to back, and they just put pressure against each other and keep this piece in place while the glue dries up. And I just put on the top trim piece here. It's glued down as well as screwed. I'm sorry I missed the process for that, but I'll show you how I did it on the bottom. It'll just help keep it on better than those terrible staples did. But before I attach the bottom trim, moment of truth, I need to make sure this drawer will now work with my little fancy piece that I put in, and oh my gosh, it works. It slides easily, it goes all the way in and all the way out. I don't need to be too exact here with the sanding, as it's going to be painted and covered by the trim anyway, but I'm just making sure it's smooth with no big bumps. And here we go. This is the bottom trim piece. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the one above it. I'm going to glue the back, clamp it down, and while it's clamped and glued, I'm going to put some screw holes in the back just to help keep this on. I find those little staples, they work for, a few decades, and then the trim piece tends to start to fall away, so I just want to make sure that doesn't happen. You can see here that every time I put a clamp on, I get a bit of a squeeze out of glue. That's a good thing. That means there's enough glue in that joint. It's a fully loaded joint. If you don't have any glue coming out when you clamp something, you probably didn't use enough glue. Another thing I don't have yet is a countersink bit. So what I'm doing here is just using a slightly larger drill bit to make a small indent, and then I'm going to use my regular drill bit to make the screw hole itself, and that will just leave enough room at the top for the screw head to sit down flush. I find birch veneer is sometimes difficult to stain well. It tends to be blotchy or patchy, so I'm just applying some Minwax wood conditioner here. It's easy to use. You just apply it, wipe off the excess, and let it soak in for the recommended amount of time. It's written on the can there. And what it actually does is just allows your stain to absorb more evenly. And while that's drying, I'm going to get on, finally, with my first coat of paint. This piece had so many repairs, it honestly felt like I would never get to the point where I was able to paint, which is my favorite part. But here we are, first coat. This is a custom mixed color. It is Fusion Mineral Paint. It's, I think, 4 or 5 different colors blended together. It's a nice sort of gray with a bit of a greenish blue tint to it. It looks very different when it's dry than it does right here. I tend to apply my paint in whatever direction best suits me at the time, but I always make sure that I pull my brush all in one direction before the paint gets too dry to manipulate. It has a much more professional and polished look than it does if you've got paint going in 15 different directions. I'm giving this a light 220 grit rub down here. The water-based wood conditioner tends to raise the grain a bit, so you just want to make sure you flatten that out a little bit before you put your stain on. And I'm using General Finishes gel stain in the color Nutmeg here. It's one of my favorites for mid-century pieces. It's got a nice warm glow to it. This isn't the fanciest wood or wood grain even, but it is 100 times better than what they had on there, don't you think? Here's a great view of what I was talking about, how the color of the paint wet looks very different than it does when it's dry. I'm going to be giving these a modern matte black spray finish. I'm going to do the back sides first. The pulls do stick out from the wood a bit, so those little posts you see will be exposed, so I just want to make sure that those are painted. And I don't show it here, but I do, after that dries, flip them over and do the front sides as well. I'm top coating this piece with Minwax Polycrylic. I ended up doing 3 coats on it. This is coat number 1. This is another example of me putting something on in a million directions, but making sure that I go through before it dries to pull everything in one smooth direction. It just looks so much better. I am so not using these ugly feet that it came with. I have these left over from another project. They're quite similar in tone to the stain that I used on the drawers and the top, and they're in good condition, so good to go. I'm going to put these drawers back in and add the hardware. Everything is looking great. I am super excited with how this piece turned out. I know that the people I got this from would never in a million years dream it could look like this, considering what I started with. Or they probably wouldn't have tossed it to begin with. Thank you guys for sticking with me so far in this video. I know it's a little bit longer, there were a lot of repairs, but it's gonna be worth it when you see this piece.